Good morning, John. It is I, your brother Hank Green. So, today I went on Google and asked what's the difference between... and then completely forgot what I was going to ask because the questions other people were asking were much more interesting. And so today I will go through every letter of the alphabet and ask Google what the difference between stuff is. What's the difference between a crow and a raven? They're two completely different species. If there's a bunch of them and they act and sound kind of annoying, those are probably crows. If there's one of them and you mistake it for a cat because it's huge, that's probably a raven. What's the difference between baking soda and baking powder? Baking soda is a chemical, sodium bicarbonate, that produces CO2 gas when mixed with something acidic and thus makes baked goods fluffier. Baking powder is a mixture containing both baking soda and the acid, so all you need to do is add water. What's the difference between college and university? In the US, a college is a school that teaches only the years directly after secondary education. Universities also have graduate programs. Universities sometimes have colleges inside of them, and, just to be confusing, colleges sometimes have colleges inside of them. What's the difference between dinner and supper? My coworker from England would probably disagree, but mostly they're the same thing. When supper is different, it tends to refer to a lighter and more informal evening meal than dinner. What's the difference between English and British? England is one of the countries of the United Kingdom, and Britain is the island on which England rests, along with Wales and Scotland. What a difference between fur and hair? Scientifically, nothing! What's the difference between Hulu Plus and Hulu? Hulu Plus costs money and you can watch it on your TV or mobile device. It also has slightly more content. What's the difference between the iPhone 5C and 5S? In general, things are a little bit nicer on the 5S, the design, the processor, the camera, but they're both very nice devices. What's the difference between jelly and jam? Jam is jellied fruit pulp, jelly is jellied juice, and jam is softer. What is the difference between kun and san? Kun and san are honorific suffixes added to names to show respect in Japanese. San is a general word like Mr. or Miss, and kun is used to refer to someone junior to you. And male. What's the difference between LCD and LED? LCD is the kind of display technology, while LED is a kind of backlighting. They have nothing to do with each other, and these days all TVs are LCD and most of them are backlit by LED. What's the difference between NAS and SAN? I really have no idea. It has something to do with IT infrastructure. Out of my league. Sorry. What's the difference between objective and subjective? Subjective statements are based in opinion, objective statements are based in fact on fact. What's the difference between prison and jail? Jail is where you go when you're waiting for trial or have just been arrested or detained. Prison is where you go once you've been found guilty and have been sentenced to be incarcerated. What's the difference between quick format and full format? Both will wipe all the data from your hard drive, but only the full format will rebuild the file structures the drive itself uses to store files and scan for bad sectors on the drive. That sentence was so difficult to remember! What's the difference between Rangers and Green Berets? Both are special operations forces in the US Army. Any recruit can apply to be a Ranger, but only soldiers who have been in the Army for 3 years or more can apply to be a Green Beret. Green Berets must also be able to speak 2 languages. The duties performed by both groups are similar. What's the difference between Scotch and whiskey? Scotch is actually a type of whiskey from, you guessed it, Scotland. What's the difference between to and to? To can mean either excessively or also, while to is used for everything else. Unless you mean to. What's the difference between Uber and Lyft? They're newfangled ways to get taxis, and people seem surprisingly excited about them considering most taxis will be driven by robots in 10 years. What's the difference between a visa and a green card? Green cards give you the right to work and live permanently in the US, while visas only give you temporary status. What's the difference between white and green asparagus? They're the same plant, but when white asparagus grows, farmers heap dirt on it. In the absence of light, it doesn't produce chlorophyll, and it also doesn't need the structures to be able to stand on its own, so it's milder and more tender. What's the difference between x86 and x64? x64 is the Windows 7 version that works on newer machines, while x86 is designed for older 32-bit models. What is the difference between yellow and green zucchini? This. And last question, what's the difference between zucchini and squash? A zucchini is a squash. Thank you very much, and please leave good advice in the comments. John, I will beat you on Tuesday.